Good evening, everyone. So last week we started Siman Yud Aleph in Iggeres HaKodesh. L'Haskilcha Bina. We're on page Kuf Tezayin, and we spoke last week the powerful words of the Alter Rebbe. Leizu haderach yishkein er Hashem liyeschafetz b'chayi b'sarim. That if you want that the er Hashem, the light of Hashem, should be shoichen, should reside in you, should dwell in you, b'kvias. So the way to accomplish that, to achieve that, is not through going around life chafetz b'chayi b'sarim, with your truest, most essential inner desire being for chayi b'sarim, for physical life and all of life's amenities, but rather, as he says, that a person shouldn't have a ratzon in olam haza, and rather our ratzon should be to serve Hashem. And that set the stage for where the Alter Rebbe is going to go now. Remember last week we mentioned that the nekuda of this parak is going to be the idea of ein ra yered milmayla, the idea that nothing bad comes down from heaven, and how there is no real thing as anything bad. We don't have any negative experiences. And Alter Rebbe is going to move into that topic right now. And let's do a little outside before we go inside. Now, for those of you who have been over here in Shir for a while, and especially when we learn Shar Yichud V'Amunah, so some of the concepts we're going to be talking about right now are going to be familiar to you. In Shar Yichud V'Amunah, the Alter Rebbe over there gives us to understand what does it mean to have a proper emunah in Hashem, and more specifically, when we say Hashem Echad. We have in this week's parsha, we have a few psukim that talk about. We have Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. We also have Yadata Hayoim V'Ashavei Sal V'Vecha Ki Hashem Elokim B'Shamayim Mimav V'La'aretz Mitachas Ein Oid. What does this mean? The popular understanding and conception of Hashem and us is that there is Hashem, the Creator, and He created us. And not only did He create us, but if He created us, obviously that means that He's much more powerful than us. After all, we can't create anything. We couldn't create a mosquito if we wanted to, as the Medrash says. If all the Chacham in the world came together, they couldn't create a mosquito. There's a joke about an atheist who turns to Hashem and says, "We don't need you anymore. Today, with science, we can do anything. Whatever you did, we can do. We can do it even better. You want to see? I know you made man out of the earth. Watch, I'll take some earth, and I'll be able to create a live being out of it." So he bends down and picks up some earth, and Hashem says to him, No, you have to use your own earth.
That's cheating.
Yeah, I didn't start with earth. I started with nothing.
Nothing. Zero.
Right? Now, the human being, yesh mi ayin, we can't create anything. And the Eibishter Hashem created, obviously, the heavens and the earth and everything within it. Obviously, Hashem is much greater than us, and we believe that Hashem watches over us. But ultimately, there's Him and there's us, and He created us, and we are beings, and He's watching and managing and controlling the situation to the best of His ability, which He has infinite ability, so that's a lot. That's the common conception. But the truth, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Shar Yichud V'Amunah, that's not the case at all. And if that were the case, then the pasuk V'yadaita Hayoim V'Ashavei Sal V'Vecha Ki Hashem Hu Elokim B'Shamayim Mimav V'La'aretz Mitachas Ein Oid wouldn't make sense. Hashem Hu Elokim B'Shamayim Mimav V'La'aretz Mitachas Ein Oid means there's nothing else. Ein Oid Milvadei. What does Ein Oid Milvadei mean? Nothing other than Hashem. So the Alter Rebbe explains from the Baal Shem Tov that in fact we don't exist. The worlds don't exist. You're shaking your head. Like you're fine with that. So,
No, we see the world. We see something.
but what does it mean the worlds don't exist? And the pasuk says, "Bereshis bara Elokim es hashamayim v'ha'aretz." What does it mean? It means that the worlds don't independently exist. When Hashem created the world, He did not give them, He did not imbue them with the quality of existence. What does that mean, the quality of existence? That if Hashem were to, for one moment, to stop creating them, they would continue to exist? No. If for one moment Hashem would stop creating the world, we know HaKodesh b'tuvei b'chol yom tamid ma'aseh bereshis. What does that mean? Why does Hashem have to recreate the world every minute? Think about it for a second. When you go, you paint a painting, do you have to repaint it every minute, every day? No. Okay, maybe one day it fades, you have to touch it up a little. But the Eibusha is recreating the world constantly. Why? And the answer is because the world doesn't exist. Rather, the world is being recreated at every moment. At every moment, the fact that the world is in existence is because Hashem is providing an existence for this moment, and no more than that. So, what really exists is only Hashem. Hashem exists, and His creative power, His koyach, His ability to create. And as the mashal that we gave many times is, imagine you have a projector projecting a scene on a wall, and you see all the, you see people dancing. Are people really dancing? No. Okay, imagine now a projector that could project 3D images instead of 2D images. Imagine a projector that can project 3D images, and imagine if it's a projector that can project images that have consciousness also. That think that they don't even know that they're being projected. That's really what Hashem is. He's a projector, projecting us into existence. The difference is, we're not 2D, we're 3D. And Hashem, in an incredible feat, which the Alter Rebbe says in Shayich V'Amunah, is no less great than the actual feat of creation itself. Hashem causes that the projections aren't even aware of the projector. That here we are, we're constantly being projected into existence, and we're completely unaware of that. We think that we exist, we think that we are, and we're not. We're just being projected into existence by Hashem at every single moment.
You're in existence every single moment. There is an existence involved there. But you're renewing that existence.
We don't own the quality of existence. If we owned that quality, then we'd exist even if Hashem removed His hand from us. Why, if Hashem for one moment stops creating us, we stop existing? Because we don't essentially exist. We don't have that quality. To use an example that we gave back in the day, imagine if you see, if a stone, a rock comes flying through the window. So are we all looking at it and marveling and saying, "Wow, look at that, a flying rock"? I never saw a flying rock. No one says there's a flying rock. What do you say?
Somebody threw the rock.
Who's that Meshugana?
They threw the rock.
They threw the rock, right? Because rocks don't fly. And even when the rock is flying, when it's in the air, is it essentially any different than a rock that's lying on the ground? Is it a flying rock? At the moment when it's in the air, is it a flying rock? No, it's not. It's the same as the rock that's on the ground. It's not a flying rock. There's nothing special about this rock, because rocks don't fly. So it's in the air right now because it's being flown. Someone flew it. It doesn't fly. It was flown. We don't exist. We're being existed. Mm-hmm. So even at the moment when you look at us and we're no different than nothing. Just like the rock is no different, that's flying through the air is no different than the rock on the ground, because rocks don't fly. Nothing doesn't exist. We're ayin. We're essentially nothing. So what does it mean? At every moment we're being pushed into existence, but we don't have that quality of existence. The only thing that has the quality of existence is Hashem Himself.
It's not sustainable. We can't sustain that existence.
Because we don't have it.
There's no independent vitality.
Correct. We have no independent yeshus. Everything is being given to us at every moment by Hashem.
That could be so. So what's the point there?
Another example that the Rebbe gives of Kriyas Yamsuf, if you remember. The wind is coming and blowing the water and holding it up as well. The moment the wind goes away, it collapses. Why? Because water doesn't stand. The same thing is, nothing doesn't exist. So the moment that the power, what we call the koyach hapoyel benifal, that power of Hashem which is forcing us into existence goes away. So like the Yam Suf, we collapse back, we revert to nothingness. Now this sounds like a abstract philosophical idea. When I say abstract, I mean it's not so difficult to understand. But how relevant is it? What difference does this make in our lives? Whether or not Hashem created the world and then is managing the world, or whether the world is at every single moment being renewed by Hashem because it doesn't contain its own, doesn't have its own existence. What's the practical difference? I think we might have said once, the story that said whether it happened or not doesn't make a difference, about one of the early Hasidim. Today a lot of the concepts in Hasidus have already become accepted universally, but at the time when they were said, when the Alter Rebbe wrote the concepts in Shaykhut V'Emunah, they were not something which the average person took for granted, the average Fruma Yid. So the story goes about a Chassid was talking to someone who has not yet learned Hasidus, and the non-Chassid challenges the Chassid and says, what did you gain by learning Hasidus? And he says, let me ask you a question. He says, this cup over here, if Hashem decided he doesn't want it to exist anymore, what would he do? I says, what do you mean? Hashem, he could do, he'll cause a big fire to descend and burn the cup. And the Chassid says, yeah, but there will be ashes. So he's not getting rid of it completely. He says, yeah, but Hashem can make such a big fire that it wouldn't even leave any ashes. Which is obviously, that's a comical understanding of the reality. What is the real answer? If Hashem didn't want this cup to exist, what would happen?
Won't exist.
It wouldn't exist. Why? Because the only reason why this cup exists is because Hashem wants it to exist. And therefore, at this moment, Hashem decided he wants it. The moment he doesn't want it, Hashem doesn't have to do anything to destroy it. It's an automatic reaction that the moment that Hashem doesn't want it to exist, it doesn't exist anymore. This underlies and underpins the Baal Shem Tov's theory of Hashgacha Pratis, which we've discussed in the past. What does Hashgacha Pratis mean? Most people translate Hashgacha Pratis as divine providence, but that's not really that's not really an accurate translation of Hashgacha Pratis. Divine providence is a translation of Hashgacha. In other words, Hashgacha means providence. Pratis doesn't mean divine. So if the assumption is that when we're talking here, we're talking about Hashem, we're talking about the divine, right? So if you want to talk about Hashgacha, Hashgacha means divine providence. What is Hashgacha Pratis?
Each individual has Hashgacha on him.
Sorry?
Each individual of the Prati has
Right.
Hashgacha on him.
So there's a shliach who's today in Minnesota. His name is Rabbi Feller. Back in the days in the 60s, he wrote a column for the Jewish press. And he spoke there about Hashgacha Pratis, and before he gave the article into print, he gave it to the Rebbe to look over. And the Rebbe, he had written about divine providence, the Rebbe added in personal, divine personal providence. That's the translation of Pratis.
Yeah.
Personal, detailed. Hashgacha Pratis means that it's not only that Hashem is watching over the big things, but he's also watching over
Everything.
the small things. And as the example that I remember in the beginning of COVID, we gave this example, the famous example of the Baal Shem Tov, which he says that if there's a leaf that's blowing across a meadow, and as a leaf blows in the wind, so it twists and turns, so the amount of time that it twists and it turns is also Hashgacha Pratis. Now what does that mean? Think about that for a second. It means Hashem is watching the leaf and making sure it only twists and turns a certain amount of times. Let's contrast that with the way we usually with the way we commonly view things. Imagine you're walking in a meadow, you went on vacation, you went to the country for the Shabbos, it's Sunday, you're taking a stroll, and suddenly you hear the thunder and the lightning and the wind starts blowing, and it starts pouring, and there are a lot of leaves that are scattering all over the place and rolling in the wind and twisting in the wind. So what do you think? The normal way that a Yid thinks, you make a bracha, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu melech haolam, shakochei gvurasi malei olam, oiseh ma'aseh bereishis, totally acknowledging that Hashem is the one who caused the storm. I didn't cause the storm. You didn't cause the storm. Hashem caused the storm. Why did Hashem make the storm? So, put yourself in that situation. What's your mind thinking?
You can make a bracha.
Sorry?
So you can make a bracha.
So you can make a bracha. That's one reason. You could think, maybe there's some fields that they need to be right. They need to be irrigated. They need rain.
Fertilized.
Maybe there's some bad people in the next city over that are planning on doing planning a bank robbery, and the Eibishter feels a need to
Scare them off.
to scare them off, to interrupt their plans. There's something big. There's a big thing going on, and the Eibishter is making a storm. No one is looking at the little leaf and thinking that there's a reason why the leaf is twisting. The leaf is twisting because the storm. The question is why there's the storm, not why the leaf is turning, right? No one thinks about the leaf. And why is that? Because the normal way of thinking is hashgacha klalis, not hashgacha pratis. Hashgacha klalis means we think that Hashem in general is keeping tabs over everything. And all the big things that happen have a reason. And of course Hashem is watching also over the small things, that nothing should go out of control. But ultimately, Hashem does big things, and small things, there's collateral damage. And therefore we have to figure out the big reason. And the Baal Shem Tov says, no, it's not about figuring out the big reason. It's also pratis, every single detail is also on purpose.
Every leaves.
Every leaf, how many times it's twisting, it's also on purpose. As we spoke last year. Right? We said there's an epidemic, there's a pandemic, there's COVID. And everyone's thinking, what's the reason for it? We know it's caused by Hashem. Why is it happening? It's this, it's that. It's a big statement about Mashiach. It's about Iggeres. It's about this government falling and causing how many theories there are run, right? I'm not a Navi, I don't know if any of the theories are correct or incorrect.
Are we allowed to
That's not the point. It's not the point. It's not, yeah, you can ask why, you can speculate why, as long as it brings you to Yiddish Shemaim. The operative question really is, how has COVID affected me? I had to be home for 5 weeks, 6 weeks. Why am I home for 5 weeks? Or any other way in which you were impacted? Most of us aren't thinking about that. We're thinking that, why am I home? Because of COVID. The question is why there's COVID. That hashgacha pratis means there's a reason why you're home. That there's no such thing ever that there's a big plan and a big idea, and the small details are just, as you say, consequence, right? Collateral damage. No. Hashem is watching over every single detail, and there's a reason for every detail. There could have been COVID without impacting you. If it impacted you, there's a reason, there's a message, something about that Hashem wants from you. There's a message for you.
How do you figure?
I think I've mentioned in the past the story, there were a bunch of women. I'm sure I mentioned the story, maybe even multiple times. It's an amazing story. A bunch of women in the 1970s, late 1970s, Lubavitch women, they went to Michigan for a convention.
The airport.
And they got stuck, right? They got stuck in the airport. Snowstorm. The veterans know the story.
I heard this story.
Yeah. They call up right away, the Rebbe's office. Why is this happening? What should we do? And the Rebbe's like, I don't understand. We keep on talking about Hashgacha Pratis. By your convention, you probably spoke about Hashgacha Pratis. And here, when something of this sort happens, you start calling and saying these ridiculous things. Obviously, the reason why you're there is because you have a mission over there. Go spread Torah, mitzvahs, Yiddishkeit in the airport, in the city, in the newspapers, and that's why you're there. That's Hashgacha Pratis. Once again, when we see a storm, a snowstorm, and the whole city is closed down, so we never stop to think about me, how I'm impacted. What is the big reason behind it? Everyone says, don't think about the big reasons, think about you, think about the Hashgacha Pratis, what is it about you? But where does that come from? How do we know that? Maybe Taka it's Hashgacha Klaus. Maybe Taka Hashem just is a reason for the storm, And maybe the amount of times that the leaf twists in the air, maybe it's talking not bekavana. Maybe Hashem makes the wind, and if there's wind, the leaves are going to blow. How do we know? What's the proof of the Baal Shem Tov? How do we know? How do we know that Hashgacha Pratis is in fact the way it is? Anyone here ever been by maybe a science museum where they show how the old movies used to be? Old movies were, there you go. You have like a whole reel of pictures, and you move it by hand, and the pictures flip very quickly.
That's the first ones.
Right? And you know what I'm talking about? So if you're watching a movie like that, okay, and you see a mosquito flying, now you know this mosquito that's flying is really
Film, or it's coming in front of the screen?
You're watching this film, but really you know that it's just 1,000 pictures one after another, right?
Yeah.
Or 1,000 drawings. Would you say, oh, well, why is there a mosquito now in the scene? Well, really, there shouldn't have been a mosquito. But because there was a mosquito here 10 seconds ago, that's why there's the mosquito it stayed here, it got stuck. That's silly. If every single one is a new picture every single time, there's a reason why the mosquito was there. Otherwise, the mosquito wouldn't be there. If Hashem is recreating the world every moment, that means that leaf is being recreated every moment also. And the fact that one moment the leaf is like this, and the next moment it's twisting like this and like this, the Eibishter is creating it at every single moment in that way. So of course there has to be a reason why it's twisting. And of course it has to be bekavana, because nothing is happening naturally. Hashem is recreating it every single moment in a specific way. And obviously, at every moment when Hashem is recreating the world, He has a reason for every single detail that He's recreating. If we believe that the world exists, and Hashem is just managing it, so then Hashgacha Pratis is not something which is an obvious conclusion. Maybe not. There's a world, and Hashem decides now, ooh, I need to bring a storm, so He brings a storm, but that storm is going to cause havoc on the world. Now Hashem is watching again, and Hashem is making sure that nothing goes, gets out of hand. But ultimately, there's not necessarily every detail is planned. There's a world that runs according to a certain nature. Hashem is intervening once in a while. Hashem is watching over once in a while. But there's no reason to believe that every single detail is bekavana. But if there is no world, in other words, it really depends on what's your original, your starting point. Is your starting point there is a world or that there isn't a world? If your starting point is that there's a world which Hashem is managing and controlling, then Hashgacha Pratis is not something which is an obvious fact. But if your starting point is the opposite way, your starting point is Einoid Milvade, there is no world, and the fact that I see something, it's because at this very moment the Eibishter is forcing it, His Ratzon is forcing it into existence. So then, obviously every single detail is according to Hashem's Ratzon and Kavana, because at this moment it's being created in that way.
So what's B'shat in Teva? This is the Derech HaTeva. Everything's been created then, and there's a Kavanah for everything. So how does Teva play into the fact?
Yeah, Teva and Nes are...
That word is very common.
That's Kavanah
But Derech
also.
HaTeva.
That's part of Kavanah also.
Yeah, but it's Teva. How do you define Teva?
Teva is created by God also.
I understand
Teva is
that.
created by God also.
Yeah, but he says constantly it's being created.
So constantly
and
that
it's
Teva
not
created.
Here. It's here, it's not here.
The
It's
constant...
not here.
Hashem...
So how do you define Teva?
There are certain rules by which Hashem... So I'm telling you, there's certain rules by which Hashem organized Himself, and when He's recreating the world, it's usually according to those rules that he made. But those aren't logical rules. The only reason why Teva is Teva and Nes is Nes, the Gemara, famous Gemara of Mendoza, Misha Amar L'Shemen V'Yadlik, Gemer L'Choymitz V'Yadlik. We mentioned it recently.
Yeah.
What?
But it is logical. That's the whole point.
What's logical?
He created the world in such a way that it's logical. Everything.
I disagree. Logical means that if oil burns and not vinegar, so the scientists will examine the properties of oil and the properties of vinegar, and they'll say, oh, here, this is something oil has and the vinegar doesn't have, so that's why oil burns. Now, if it was the other way around, the vinegar burnt and not oil burnt, so the scientists would look at the properties of vinegar and say, oh, that's why. The scientists, there's no why to what they're saying. That's metaphysics. They're just examining something and figuring out the way the world works, and based on that, they make predictions for the future, what's going to be, because they've studied the way the world works. But it doesn't have to be that way. It could have been the other way entirely. They're studying post fact.
The way it is logical.
Because everything's repeatable.
Yes.
Exactly, because Hashem created the world in a way that Hashem creates the world using the words of Teva in a way that's repeatable. Yeah,
right.
That everything can be replicated. Yes, correct.
So what is the difference if it's managed or being? It comes out the same. The result is.
So implication number one is the idea.
What difference does it make to me?
So I'm answering. Implication number one is Hashgacha Pratis.
So how does that apply to me?
How does that apply to you, Hashgacha Pratis?
If I don't even know what the answer is to why these things are happening.
You have to look for the answers.
But it happens that there's a tether to it.
No. Going back a year and a half ago, COVID struck.
Yeah.
You were at home.
Right.
Did you stop and ask yourself, what mission does Hashem have for me at home? Why am I at home?
I didn't ask.
You didn't?
Because I didn't have it. I couldn't figure out an answer.
Well, you can't say that if you didn't think about it. Hashgacha Pratis, and this is something also we've spoken about in the past. Hashgacha Pratis is always demanding of you and asking of you, why did Hashem put me in this particular circumstance? What is my job over here? I'll give you another example. There's a famous vart of the Baal Shem Tov, which is that when you see another Yid, and you see that a person did something wrong, if you see something bad in another person, it's a mirror. It's a mirror. That person's acting as a mirror. So that means you have to fix it in yourself.
But he's doing bad, you're doing it.
Yeah, he did something bad and I have to fix myself. Explain that to me. Explain that to me. So I saw him. Yeah, there are a lot of people do bad things. I happen to see, okay, I'm walking in the street and we were talking before about bank robbers. I see some guy entering a bank and they're robbing it. You're telling me that now there's something bad wrong with me? Okay, I'm not a bank robber, but there's something I have to search for myself, something along those lines. Who said? Because he's bad, he did something wrong, I have to suffer, and I have to assume there's something wrong with me. But what's the answer to that?
Why you hear it? Why you
If
hear it in
Hashem
the wrong
made you
place?
sick,
Why did you see it?
Why you see
Again, at this very moment, Hashem created me and him in the same vicinity. Why? Why didn't Hashem create that I should be here?
And not to see anything.
And that's b'kavana. Every detail is b'kavana. That Hashem wanted me to see it. Why did he want me to see it? Because there's a lesson I can learn from it. Something about me. So that, yes, Hashgacha Pratis is a big idea in Chassidus that everything that a person sees or hears is a hira b'avodas Hashem. So one way of looking at that is as opportunistic. Well, if you see something, don't waste what you saw. Learn a hira b'avodas Hashem. But it's not being opportunistic. It comes from the deeper understanding that if I saw something, it's because Hashem orchestrated that I should see it. Why did Hashem orchestrate that I should see it? Because He wants me to learn Ahira, B'Avedas Hashem. And if I see something that's good, it's because Hashem wants me to learn something good from that person. And if I see the opposite, it's because Hashem wants me to look at myself in the mirror and realize that I have maybe something in a very small way, in a subtle way. I have bidakus, as they say, I have the same idea. So this has a very practical implication on your life. And something else. Besides for Hashgacha Pratis, or not besides, one of the important elements within Hashgacha Pratis is the understanding that nothing bad can ever happen. Think about it for a second. Think using your mind, not your heart. Let's use logic over here. If Hashem is creating the world at every single moment, and Hashem is good, can there ever be anything bad? This is a question of 2 + 2 = 4. Think about it. If Hashem created the world 5,781 years ago, and He put people on there and different and we know people can wreak havoc on Hashem's world, and Hashem is watching from above and trying to do damage control, right? So then, something bad things can happen, and Hashem is like, "Oh, something bad's happening over there, but I'm busy watching that place. Something worse is happening over there, or okay, something bad is happening, but it's not bad enough for." Things can spiral out of control. But if Hashem is creating the world at every moment, how is it possible that anything should be bad? If something bad happens, what are you saying? Either you're saying Hashem is not creating the world at any moment, or Hashem isn't good.
Is there Bechira?
There is Bechira.
Last week you
1 second.
cited a pasuk in Eicha.
Yeah.
I forgot how it goes.
The PL Yuletetzi Harois.
Right. Haros v'hatovos.
No, Vahatoiv.
Yeah, but it says that there, that it's not, it's asking the question, doesn't Hashem cause both the good and the bad?
You notice that I told you that when you get to the pasuk, you're going to have a question. You remember that I said that?
Yes.
There's an answer to that.
So you're not going to...
Rabbi, a lot of times, something bad happened, we think it's bad, but 2 months later, you see this bad was good for me. So it's not bad, like you said.
Yeah, and sometimes we never know. Come to me afterwards. I believe the Erech Chaim answers that question. Just have to find where he answers that question. He answers it based on the Ro'is v'hatoiv, the plural versus the singular. I'll try to find you the answer. But again, we're asking here a logic question. If Hashem creates the world at every single moment, so you asked about Bechira.
No, yeah.
Yeah. You asked about Bechira.
Not me.
Yeah, we have Bechira. Bechira means we have the freedom to choose. We don't have the freedom to we're not God. We can't change the world. Chavis Al-Vavis writes this very clearly. This idea that the Munah B'tachon means that nothing and no one can affect me or impact me other than the Eibishter. We don't control outcomes. We don't control what happens in the world. We control our choices. By way of example, okay, so if Reuven decides to kill Shimon, so he has Bechira Chavshis. Nothing's going to stop that Bechira Chavshis. He takes out a gun, and he's going to shoot him. Is Shimon going to die?
No, maybe not.
Maybe. What does it depend on? Depends on what happened Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur. If on Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur the year before, it was Nigzar on Shimon to die, he'll die. And by the way, if it was Nigzar on him to die, then he would die regardless. Because Harbe Shluchim Lamakim. And if it wasn't Nigzar on him to die, the gun will lock. You have the freedom to choose, but you don't choose the outcomes. You don't do the Eibishter controls outcomes. The world, nothing in the world happens without the Eibishter. Unless it was Nigzar Melamayla to be that way. So there's nothing. This is implication number 2, and this is where Laskil Chabina is going to take us. The understanding that the world is being created at every single moment allows a person to be happy at all times, because a person understands that Ein Ra Yored Melamayla, there's no such thing as evil coming from heaven. If Hashem is creating it, it has to be good.
If there's a tragedy, how could you be happy? If you go to Levaya, I mean it's there's no Ra, so you should be very happy. It's going to Olam Haba, whatever, you know. So where's grief and sadness come into play?
That's a good question. We'll have to deal with that. We will. This week, next class. But you're asking a question which and what if I told you, yeah, we have to be happy?
You have to be happy.
Meaning, what I'm saying is,
based on
I'm
your emunah.
making a logical argument, and you're not responding with a logical argument against.
No, it's based on your emunah. If it's real, called it whatever God does is for the good. For the good, there's no such thing of ra. So therefore, your emotional response should be you should be happy about it. But based on your emunah.
Is that logical? It would seem so.
Yeah, but
It would seem that a person should always be happy regardless, because
Right.
everything comes from Hashem.
That's right.
That would be the logical conclusion. Yeah.
That's
Now-
what I'm asking.
Okay. Now, are there exceptions to this rule, and what are the reasons? We have to talk about that. But yeah, that would seem to be the logical conclusion. The absolute understanding that everything that comes from Hashem is good. And this is a basic belief in Yiddishkeit. Hashem runs everything. Hashem is good. It's not only He runs everything. Again, it's much deeper than running everything. He's actually recreating everything at every moment. Right. Now, for those of you who have been here a really long time, I'm talking about back to Likutei Amarim days. So you remember in Perek Chavav, in Tanya, the Alter Rebbe spoke about this concept, the idea of Gamzu L'Tova. But over there, the concept of Gamzu L'Tova was related to the idea of Simcha. There, the Alter Rebbe was talking about the importance of being B'Simcha. How can you be B'Simcha when bad things happen? Okay, so there we talk about Gamzu L'Tova. Here in our Perek, the point of the Alter Rebbe is not Simcha. Although Simcha is an outcome, it's a benefit. That's not really where the Alter Rebbe is going with. What the Alter Rebbe really wants over here is, what is your emunah? What is your perspective? If you have a correct perspective, if you have a Jewish perspective, the perspective of Einod Milvadoi, that's what's the most important thing. Why were you put down here in this world? And the Alter Rebbe says this very clearly. We'll read this inside. Alter Rebbe says, you want to know why you're put down here in this world? Because this world is a alma de shikra. It's a world that lies. It's a world that says, I'm a Metzias, I'm a Yesh, I'm something. And a Yid was put down in this world to look the world in its face and say, you're a liar, you don't exist. Eined Milvadei. Ve'emetz Hashem le'olam. If you are upset and sad and devastated by problems of bani, chayim, ezoini, by all these material matters, the problem isn't that you're sad. Yeah, that's also a problem. You know, chachmei emes herchiku ma'oid ha'atzvus, that as the Alter Rebbe says, b'chsidim always, we talk about how it's important to stay away from negative emotions and how important it is to be b'simcha. So if you're sad, it's a problem that you're sad. But there's a much bigger problem than the fact that you're sad. The bigger problem is you're failing the ultimate test. The ultimate test that you're put down here in this world is, can you be here in this world and still have the perspective of Einod Milvadei? L'mayla, in the higher worlds, that's obvious, that's clear. The Malachim know that. Everyone knows that. You're put down here in this world, which the world is called Alma de Shikra. That's what it is. It lies. And the job of a Yid is to come down in the world and be a beacon of light and not be dispelled from the lie, and to steer the lie in the face and say you're a lie. And the emes is Torah, the emes is Hashem. And if you're saddened and bothered by worldly matters, the bigger problem than your sadness is that you're failing your ultimate test in life. Because if you really believe that Einod Milvadei, and you really believe that at every moment the world is being recreated from nothing by Hashem, then what could bother you? Let's do this inside. Page Kuf Tez Zayin, which is opposite of page 230.
Amen.
You saw it at the top?
No, the bottom. Ubir Inyan.
Very
Ubir Inyan who, the explanation is, Rak Emuna Amitis B'Yotzer B'Reishis. We have to have only a true Emuna in Yotzer B'Reishis. What is Yotzer B'Reishis? Pasha Pshat. Yotzer B'Reishis, the one who created the world in the beginning. The Alter Rebbe has a deeper pshat al pi Kabbalah. What does Yotzer B'Reishis mean? Hainu, this means Shabriya Yesh Mi'ayin. Where does creation come from? Creation comes Yesh Mi'ayin, something from nothing. We're something from nothing. Isn't it the other way around? Aren't we nothing from something? We're something? We're Yesh? No, we're Ayin. Who's the Yesh? Hashem is the Yesh. So why do we say we're Yesh Mi Ayin? It should be called Bria Ayin Mi Yesh. What is Yesh Mi Ayin? So the Rebbe is going to explain the Ayin. Why is it called Ayin? Because something which is so above and beyond our comprehension, our ability to understand, is called Ayin. It's called nothing in our perception. A while ago, I got a voice note on WhatsApp. I don't know, 20-second, 30-second voice note. So I play it. It's blank. I'm in my house. I was sitting in my house. I push play. Blank. You push up the volume. I push the volume all the way, the phone. Yeah. So I played it again. Garnished. And suddenly I hear from the back of the house, my kids are screaming at me, Tati, turn that off. That's so annoying. I'm like, what's that all about? It's interesting. You have a certain sound which is on a high frequency. I shared it afterwards on my family group, and the taka works that people over 40 around can't hear it because our hearing has eroded a little, and it's a very high frequency. So in my family, pretty much everyone who was over 40 couldn't hear it. Everyone under 40 could hear it and was telling us how annoying the sound was. Some people 42, some people 38. But if you can hear it, it's a very high pitch. It's not a kol d'mama daka. We're not talking about but it's so high, it's such a high frequency. The higher the frequency, the less we can hear it. There's certain frequencies that we can't hear b'chol. The dogs can hear, right? And it's such a high frequency that if you lose a little of your hearing, you can't. So for me, it was ayin. I listened to it, there was nothing there. It's ayin. What is it ayin? It's a higher frequency than anything that I could hear. But yeah, because it's a higher frequency than anything that I can hear, that's why it's ayin. That's why I can't hear it at all. When we say yesh mi ayin, usually when you have one thing creating something else, there's a relationship between them. And that, the cause and effect, you can always look at the effect and understand the cause. That's really what, we talk about scientists. What are scientists doing? They're looking at the cause, they look at the effect, and they're trying to find the cause based on that. But sometimes you look at it, it's me'ayin, it comes from nowhere. It doesn't mean that a mamish comes from nowhere. It means that there's zero relationship between the cause and the effect. Where we come from, we look back at it and we see ayin. And what is that ayin? The ayin is Hashem's chachma. Kulam bechachma asisa. Hashem's chachma, which is the first of Hashem's spheres, is so high and so lofty that for us it's called ayin. Chachma is called reishis, as the pasuk says. Reishis chachma yiras Hashem. Reishis chachma, but also which is a reflection of the fact that of the 10 spheres, it's the first of the 10 spheres. So Yotzer Bereishis also means Yotzer, he who creates Bereishis through Reishis. Hashem creates the world with Chachma, which is Reishis, which is the Ayin, which creates our world, inside. The Hainu meaning Shabriya Yashmi Ayin, the creation of something from nothing. And what is this Ayin? Hanikras Reishis Chachma, the Ayin. When we say Yashmi Ayin, this Ayin is Reishis Chachma. V'hi chachma, this is Hashem's chachma, she'ena museges l'shum nivra, which can't be grasped or understood by any creation, which is why it is called ayin. Habriya hazoisi b'chol eis v'rega. This creation, which Hashem creates the world through His chachma, as we said, there's a pasuk Hashem b'chachma yosad aretz, kulam b'chachma asisa. The world is through Hashem's chachma. This is b'chol eis v'rega, at every moment. Shemeshavim kol habruim yashmi ayin. All creations are created something me ayin. What is the ayin? Mechachmasa yizbarach, from Hashem's chachma hamechaye es hakel. When a person contemplates the depth of his understanding, the yitzayir bedaite. Picture in your mind, envision in your mind. Haveyasei me ayin. The fact that you are being created from ayin, which is from nothing or from chachma, b'chol rega v'rega mamish. Literally at every moment you're being recreated from ayin. Hey chiyala al daitei. How can you even entertain the thought? kiraloi, that something happening is bad. Or you have suffering from bani, chayim, mezoni, children, life, health, sustenance, livelihood. Or any other suffering in the world. Where are we coming from? Hashem's Chochmah, the Ayin. Hariya Ayin Chichachmasa, Yisbarech, the Ayin, which is Hashem's Chochmah, who Makar HaChayim V'atoig V'oinig. It is the source of life and goodness and pleasure. It is the Eidan which is higher than Elam Haba. The Pasuk says in Bereshis, V'nohar yoytze me'edan lahashkreis es hagan. Which means you have Gan Eden. What does Gan Eden mean? Gan Eden is the garden
of Eden
that is being irrigated by Eden. V'nohar yoytze me'edan, a river departs from Eden, lahashkreis, and that gives to drink to the garden. So Gan Eden itself is not, Gan Eden is the garden that receives from Eden. Eden is higher. Eden itself is higher than Gan Eden. Now, the physical Gan Eden was the physical representation of the way it is Lamayla. The way it is Lamayla also. The place of the greatest Ta'anugim is Gan Eden. And to use the terminology of Kabbalah, that's in the world of Bria. V'nohar yoytze me'Eden. Eden is Chochmah. Eden itself is Chachma. Nahar, what extends from Chachma? Nahar, which is Bina. Nahar yoytze me'Eden lahashkes es hagan. And in Gan Eden, they're only getting from the Bina. That means that Hashem's Chachma is the makar of Gan Eden. Hashem's Chachma is Eden, which is the makar of Gan Eden. So if we think about it, the highest and greatest, the most incredible pleasures that are possible to envision is Gan Eden. And Hashem's Chochmah is the source of that. And that, Hashem's Chochmah, which is the source of the greatest pleasures in the world, is recreating us every moment. So everything is so amazing. Why don't we feel it? Because we can't comprehend it. That's why we think that we have Ra, that we have negative things, or Yisurim, or suffering. But in truth, nothing negative or evil comes down from heaven. Everything is good. The only thing is, it is too good for us to understand and to be able to appreciate. Go and put $100,000 in the bank account of a 2-year-old kid. They won't appreciate it. Give them a lollipop, they'll appreciate it. The idea of $100,000 is just too much and too great for a little kid to be able to understand, to be able to grasp. If something, there are only two types of experiences in life. There are things that are good, and there are things that we appreciate, the things that are good that we don't appreciate. And if we don't appreciate it, it only means that it is a greater good. We'll stop over here for a moment. We still have a lot to talk and a lot to process, which we'll do Mir Hashem next class. But to conclude a little, Minyoni Diyema. You know, this Shabbos is called Parshas Nachamu, Shabbos Nachamu. Nachamu Ami, right? We begin with Nachamu. And as the Medrash says, what does it mean Nachamu? Why does it say Nachamu Ami? So, double Lashon. Okay, you could say it's poetry, but we know that there's no such thing as stam poetry. Everything has an inner significance. So the Medrash says, Laksa b'kiflayim, because that we received a double portion of makis, of affliction, so therefore we get a nachama b'kiflayim, we get a double portion also of nachama. What does it mean, a double portion of nachama? It sounds good, but what does it mean? What does it mean? What is a single portion of laksa, of being afflicted? And what is a double portion? What is a single portion of nachama? And what is a double portion? What is the significance of these words? Why only double? Maybe it should be triple. Like, what is the significance of these words? And we know in the end of the Masechtas Makis we have a similar story, where the Gemara says they had a bunch of Tanoim, right, going to Rome. Famous stories. They had Rabbi Gamliel, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, Rabbi Yeshua, Rabbi Akiva going in the road, and they're approaching Rome, and they hear the Koil Hamoino Shel Remi. They hear the hustle and bustle, the Freilichkeit of the city, and they all start crying, and Rabbi Akiva starts laughing. And we know that they ask Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you crying?" And he says, "Why are you?" He says, "They ask Rabbi Akiva, why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" So they answered, "Take a look, how these goyim, they bowed down to idols, and they're yoshvin betach v'hashket, and they're in tranquility and peaceful of anu, and us, our Beis Hamikdash has been destroyed in fire. We shouldn't cry." So Rabbi Akiva said, "Yeah, that's why I'm laughing." Right? If that's what the pleasures that Hashem is giving to those who go against as well, can you just imagine the pleasures, the rewards that are awaiting those who do as well? And then this is another story. That also once the same group, they were going up to Yerushalayim, they reached Harat Soifim, which is the mountain next to Yerushalayim. Karu Bigdeim, they tore Kriya. They get to the Har HaBayis, what? They see a fox coming out of the base HaKodesh HaKadoshim. They started crying, and Rabbi Akiva starts laughing again. They ask Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you laughing? Why are you crying?" So again, they say, "What do you mean?" Place regarding which the Torah says, "Hazar HaKar of Yumas," and now Shualim Hilchu Bay. Now we have foxes coming out. So Rabbi Akiva gives all the answer that basically there are two nevuas, and one of them is Tzia in Sada Techaresh, Tzia in that the Beis Hamikdash will be plowed like a field, and in another one it says Oid Yeshus Canaan was Canaan Berchevis Yerushalayim, and these two of nevuas are linked. So long that the first nevuah didn't come true. I didn't know about the second one, but now I see the second one came true. In other words, now that I see Tzia Sada Techaresh, Tzia was plowed like a field, I know also will have Oid Yeshus Canaan Berchevis Yerushalayim, and the other people, they all answered Akiva Nichamtanu, which is also like Nachamu. There's double, and there's a lot of questions on this Gemara. It's a lot of. One of them is a very interesting one. Is they ask Rabbi Akiva, "Why are you crying? Why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" Rabbi Akiva didn't know why they were crying. It's a game he's playing with them, just playing Jewish. It gets better than that. If you were paying attention, the Gemara says they reached Harat Soifim, they all tore Kriya, including Rabbi Akiva. And then they get to the Beis Hamikdash and they start crying. Rabbi Akiva says, "Why are you crying?" "What do you mean, why are you crying? You just tore Kriya. You know exactly what's going on over here. What's this game that you're playing over here?" So there's a sikha from the Rebbe. The Rebbe explains that at each point they were crying, Rabbi Akiva was laughing. They said, "Why are you laughing?" He says, "Why are you crying?" In other words, why are you crying now? What just happened now? You didn't know that Rome was in charge. And they get to the Har HaBayis, you didn't know the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. You tore Kriya 20 minutes ago. Why are you crying now? And in both places, what they told Rabbi Akiva was, yes, we knew Rome was in charge, that destroyed our Beis Hamikdash. We knew the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but we didn't understand the extent. We didn't understand the Laksa B'Kiflayim. Not only did the Romans destroy Beis Hamikdash, but take a look how they're shaket, the shaman. Take a look at how they're enjoying themselves, how happy they are. That's a chil Hashem. Did we need that? The Eibishter wanted to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, Beseda, destroy the Beis Hamikdash, but did he then have to lift up Rome on the pedestal, and that they should be having such a wonderful time? That wasn't necessary. He could have destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, and they could have been a Ummah Shfela, Ummah Bezuya, a nation without any covet. Same thing, the Eibishter destroyed it. We knew the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed, but a fox coming out of the Beis Hamikdash, Ad Kedei Kach, such a... And Rabbi Akiva answers, and the answer to the both of them was that you should know, the greater the Bezoyan, the greater that the Geula is going to be. Siyin Sadat Techaresh is an interesting pasuk. Siyin is going to be plowed like a field. Why do we plow fields? To destroy the field?
No, to grow it.
To grow produce. The better you plow, the more you destroy the earth, what's going to happen is the greater the produce you're going to have. The greater the Yerida, the greater the Aliyah. From the Yerida of Tisha B'Av, we come to the Aliyah of Chamisha Asar B'Av, when L'Hayu Yom Te'um L'Yisrael Ka Chamisha Asar B'Av. Nechama b'kiflayim. A simple nechama is Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. Beis HaMikdash will be rebuilt. That's a simple nechama. That whatever we had before is restored. That is a simple nechama. Double nechama means not only is it restored, but we understand the purpose. We understand why we had the laksa. We realize that ein ra yered min hashamayim, ein ra yered min l'mayla. We look back at Golos, and as Yeshaya says, near this, I forgot the names. What's your name? Remind me. Sheldon. The Navi Yeshaya says, "Va'amar b'yemahu," that when Mashiach comes, we will say, "Oitcha Hashem ki anafta bi." Thank you, Hashem, for having been angry at me. Why are we thanking Hashem for Golos? But that's what we believe. When Mashiach comes, the Nechama b'Kiflayim is not only that we'll say, "Oh, it was bad, but now it's not bad anymore. Now it's good." But we'll look back at Golos, we'll understand also the reason for the Churban. Everything that we're learning here in the Siman Tanya, but Ein Ra Yirem Al Maila, right now it requires Amunah, and it's very difficult, as your questions imply, and very often it's very difficult to understand and to appreciate and to feel. And when Mashiach comes, Nachamu. Not only will the bad things go away, but we'll actually look back and understand and realize that nothing ever was bad. That's Taka Nechama B'Kiflayim. Taka B'Zeichir to Nechama B'Kiflayim. And to spend Shabbos Nachamu in Eretz Yisrael together with Mashiach Tzidkenu.
Wasn't necessary